You might think moving day is the most peaceful moment of your life. I thought so too. Until I pulled into the driveway and saw a moving truck that was not mine unloading into the house I had secretly bought. Then I heard my brother-in-law shouting orders like he was the owner. But they did not know one thing. I bought this house in secret because I had already prepared a counterattack that would silence the whole family. My name is Brianna Caldwell. For 34 years, I had been the reliable daughter, the steady sister, and the silent financier of my family's collective bad decisions. I am a project manager at Northridge Terrain Studio, a job that requires managing landscape architecture for high-net-worth clients who demand perfection down to the millimeter. I spend my days ensuring that retaining walls hold back tons of earth and that drainage systems prevent catastrophic floods. It is a profession of control, calculation, and foresight. It is ironic, then, that I spent the first 3 decades of my life unable to engineer a single boundary against the people who share my DNA. That was supposed to change today. I had bought the house in Sierra Crest 6 weeks ago. It was a secret I had guarded with the ferocity of a state witness. The property was a masterpiece of modern design, a structure of steel and glass perched on a hillside overlooking the sprawling valley of Briarwood, Colorado. It was not just a piece of real estate, it was a declaration of independence. For the first time in my life, I had something that was solely mine. There was no cosigner, no shared deed, and absolutely no room for the Caldwell family philosophy, which dictates that if one person succeeds, everyone gets a slice of the pie. I had spent 6 years saving for this down payment. I lived in a studio apartment that smelled permanently of boiled cabbage from the neighbors, drove a sedan with 200,000 miles on the odometer, and skipped every family vacation, wedding, and expensive dinner. I told them I was broke. I told them the industry was slow. I lied through my teeth so I could stash away every bonus and every paycheck until I had enough to buy my freedom. The morning sun was hitting the windshield of my car as I navigated the winding roads up toward Sierra Crest. It was 8 in the morning. My own movers were not scheduled to arrive until 1 in the afternoon. I wanted 5 hours alone in the empty house. I wanted to walk across the hardwood floors and hear nothing but the echo of my own footsteps. I wanted to stand in the floor-to-ceiling windows of the living room and drink a coffee in total silence. Then my phone rang. The screen flashed the name, Mom. My stomach tightened. A Pavlovian response conditioned by years of guilt trips and emergency loan requests. I debated letting it go to voicemail, but if she knew I was moving, ignoring her would only accelerate the drama. I answered on speakerphone, keeping my eyes on the road. "Hello, Mother," I said, keeping my voice neutral. "Brianna," Marilyn Caldwell said. Her voice was light, airy, carrying that specific tone she used when she had already decided something for you and was just waiting for you to catch up. "I was just thinking about you. You know, I was looking at the listing for that house again." I nearly swerved. I had never shown her the listing. I had never told her the address. "What listing?" I asked, my grip tightening on the steering wheel. "The one on the hill, honey, the glass one," she said, dismissive of my shock. "It is beautiful, but Brianna, really, 4 bedrooms, 3 baths? It is just so much space for one person. It is wasteful to be there all alone. Do you not think? A family needs space like that." The blood drained from my face. "How do you know about the house, Mom?" "Oh, do not be so secretive. Family knows things." She breezed past the question. "I just think you need to be realistic. You work so much. You are never home. It would be a shame for those rooms to sit empty when your sister is struggling in that cramped apartment. We have to share our blessings. Brianna, that is what family does." She hung up before I could respond. The silence in the car was heavy, suffocating. My heart began to hammer against my ribs, not with fear, but with a cold, dawning realization. She did not just know about the house. She spoke with a confidence that suggested the conversation was already over. I pressed the accelerator. The road to Sierra Crest was beautiful, lined with aspen trees that were just beginning to turn gold. But I saw none of it. I turned the final corner onto my street, a private cul-de-sac that was supposed to be my sanctuary. And then I saw it. Parked squarely in my driveway, blocking the path to the garage, was a moving truck. But it was not the professional, branded truck I had hired for later in the day. This was a battered rental, a 26-footer with a dented bumper and mud flapped up the sides. The back ramp was down, and a stream of people were marching up my walkway like an invading army. I stopped my car 50 feet away, killed the engine, and just watched. It was a scene of absolute violation. Two men I did not recognize, wearing stained tank tops and jeans, were struggling to maneuver a sofa through my custom mahogany double doors. I recognized that sofa. It was a beige microfiber monstrosity with a juice stain on the left cushion that never came out. It belonged to my sister, Tessa, and her husband, Gavin Pike. Next came a dining chair, then a box marked kitchen, fragile, then a plastic tricycle. They were moving in. I sat in my car, my hands shaking, not from sadness, but from a rage so pure it felt like ice water in my veins. They were not just visiting. They were not dropping off a housewarming gift. They were moving their entire lives into my home before I had even unlocked the front door. I looked up at the house. The morning light reflected off the massive glass panels of the living room, and there, standing on my front porch, was Gavin. He looked like he was surveying a kingdom he had just conquered. He was wearing shorts and a tight t-shirt, holding a coffee cup that I prayed was not one of mine. He pointed a finger at the movers, directing them. I cracked my window just enough to hear his voice carry over the mountain air. "Careful with that," Gavin shouted. His voice was booming, authoritative, the voice of a man who believes he is the smartest person in the room, despite a decade of evidence to the contrary. "Take that to the downstairs suite. That is going to be the CEO office. I need the light for video calls." CEO office. He was talking about the library, my library, the room I had designed with built-in walnut shelves for my architectural reference books. Gavin did not have a company. He had a string of failed ideas and a LinkedIn profile that used the word visionary 3 times. "And the sectional goes in the main atrium," he continued, gesturing broadly to my living room. "We need to set up the entertaining corner before the investors get here tonight." I watched as the movers shoved Tessa's scuffed particle board entertainment center through the door. Scraping it against the frame, I flinched, but I did not get out of the car. My instinct, the instinct of the old Brianna, the doormat Brianna, was to run up there, scream, cry, and beg them to stop. That is what they expected. They expected an emotional outburst. They expected me to yell so they could calm me down, tell me I was being hysterical, and then manipulate me into agreeing that since the stuff is already inside, we might as well let it stay for a few days. And a few days would turn into a month would turn into a year, and suddenly, I would be the guest in my own mortgage. I took a deep breath, inhaling through my nose for a count of 4, and exhaling for 4. I reached into my purse and pulled out my phone. I did not call the police, not yet. Instead, I opened the camera app and switched to video. I checked the resolution, 4K, 60 frames per second. I stepped out of the car, keeping the phone held low against my chest, recording as I walked. I focused first on the rental truck. I walked around the back, capturing the license plate clearly. I filmed the rental agreement number sprayed on the back door. I filmed the ramp extending onto my driveway, noting the mud the movers were tracking onto the pristine concrete pavers I had personally selected from a quarry in Italy. I moved closer, silent as a ghost. The movers were too busy sweating under the weight of a heavy dresser to notice me. I filmed their faces. I filmed the items they were carrying. I needed proof that this was not just a visit. You do not bring a dresser to a dinner party. You do not bring boxes marked winter clothes to a weekend stay. I zoomed in on Gavin on the porch. He was still pontificating, his back to me. "Make sure the leather chair faces the window," he told a mover. "I want to be able to look at the view when I'm closing deals." I recorded his words. I recorded the way he leaned against the doorframe, his posture relaxed, entitled. He possessed the casual arrogance of a squatter who believes he has struck gold. Then I saw the key. It was dangling from the lock on the front door. It was not my key. My key was in my pocket, attached to a simple leather fob. The key in the door had a glittery pink keychain shaped like a unicorn. It was Tessa's keychain. My mind raced back to 2 weeks ago. Mom had asked for a spare key, just in case of emergencies. She had said, "What if there is a leak and you are at work? What if you lose yours? I am your mother. Brianna, you can trust me." I had given it to her. I had hesitated, but I had given it to her because saying no to Marilyn Caldwell was like trying to hold back the tide with a spoon. Now I knew. That request was not a precaution. It was the first step of an operation. They had planned this the moment they found out about the sale. They had likely coordinated the rental truck, packed their apartment, and timed their arrival to beat me here by hours. They were banking on the fact that possession is 9/10 of the law, and that guilt is the remaining 1/10. I stopped recording for a second to check the file. It was clear. The audio was crisp. I had Gavin claiming the space. I had the movers bringing in furniture. I had the license plate. I slipped the phone into my pocket, but I kept the voice recorder app running in the background. I straightened my blazer. I smoothed my hair. I adjusted my mindset. The Brianna who paid for everyone's mistakes was gone. The woman walking up that driveway now was a project manager who dealt with structural failures for a living. And I was looking at a structural failure of massive proportions. If they were bold enough to move in before I even arrived, it meant they thought I was weak. They thought I would roll over. They thought this house was just another resource to be harvested, like my bank account, my time, and my patience. They were wrong. I walked up the driveway, the sound of my heels clicking sharply against the pavement. One of the movers looked up, saw me, and paused, sensing the shift in atmospheric pressure. Gavin turned around. His smile faltered for a fraction of a second, but then it rebounded, wider and falser than before. "Brianna," he shouted, opening his arms as if welcoming me to his home. "You made it. We wanted to surprise you and get the heavy lifting done before you got here." I did not smile. I did not frown. I just watched him, my eyes scanning the damage, my mind cataloging every single infraction. I was not here to argue. I was here to document the crime scene. "Hello, Gavin," I said. My voice was calm, terrifyingly steady. "Who authorized this truck to be on my property?" The game had begun, and for the first time in the history of the Caldwell family, I was playing by a completely different set of rules. I stepped across the threshold, and the silence I had paid 6 years of my life to purchase was already dead. The interior of the house was an open-concept marvel, designed to let light flow uninterrupted from the foyer to the valley view. Now, it was flowing over a chaotic obstacle course. My 7-year-old nephew and 5-year-old niece were sprinting circles around the living room, their sneakers squeaking against the virgin hardwood floors. They were screaming with the high-pitched delight of children who had just been released into a theme park. I did not blame them. They were children. They saw space, and they ran. But I did blame the greasy, half-open cardboard box sitting directly on the waterfall edge of my kitchen island. It was a pepperoni pizza, leaking orange oil onto the pristine white quartz I had selected specifically for its vein pattern. A crushed soda can sat next to it, leaving a ring of condensation that was already beginning to dry. Surprise? Tessa popped out from the hallway leading to the master suite. She was holding a stack of folded towels. My towels. The Egyptian cotton ones I had bought for the guest bath, and beaming as if she had just organized a birthday party. "Tessa," I said, my voice flat, "what is that pizza box doing on my counter?" She waved a hand dismissively. "Oh, relax, Bree. The movers were hungry. We have to feed the troops, right? Besides, look at this place." She spun around, arms wide. "It is huge. I told Gavin you could fit our entire old apartment in just this living room. You were insane to think you could live here all by yourself. It would be spooky. You need life in a house like this." She said it with such conviction, such absolute moral certainty. In Tessa's world, my solitude was not a preference. It was a defect that she was graciously fixing. Gavin walked in from the patio, sliding the glass door shut with a little too much force. He clapped his hands together. "The feng shui is incredible. Brianna, seriously, good pick," he said, nodding at me like a mentor approving an intern's work. "I was just checking the signal strength on the deck. It is perfect. My investors are going to lose their minds when they see the backdrop for our Zoom calls. We are talking Silicon Valley optics right here in Colorado." I stared at him. "Your investors?" "For the startup," Gavin said, leaning his elbows on my island, right next to the grease stain. "Nexus AI Consulting. I told you about this at Christmas. We are pivoting to generative language models for small businesses. But you know the game. Brianna, perception is reality. I need an address that screams success. A basement apartment screams desperation. This house says I have already made it." He looked at me with a terrifying earnestness. "And do not worry, once the Series A funding comes through, I am going to cut you a check for the maintenance fees. We will call it rent, or facility usage. Whatever works for your taxes. I am going to take care of you." The arrogance was breathtaking. He was talking about paying me fees to use my own house, sometime in a hypothetical future that would never arrive. "Gavin," I said, stepping further into the room so I was standing between him and the rest of the house. "Who let you in?" "What?" He blinked. "I locked this house last night," I said, enunciating every syllable. "I possess the only set of keys given to me by the realtor. The electronic codes have not been set up yet. So, I am asking you a direct question. How did you get inside my home?" Tessa laughed, a nervous tinkling sound. "Oh, stop acting like we broke in. Bree, you are being dramatic." She dug into the pocket of her jeans and pulled out a key ring. It was the one I had given our mother, the spare key, the emergency key, the key for watering plants and checking for leaks. "Mom gave it to us," Tessa said, holding it up. "She called us yesterday. She said you were overwhelmed. She said you needed help getting settled and that it made no sense for us to be paying rent downtown when you had 4 empty bedrooms up here. She told us to come set up early so you would not be lonely on your first night." "She told you to move in," I corrected. "She told us to be a family," Tessa shot back, her smile fading into a pout. "Why are you being so hostile? We are helping you." I did not answer. I pulled my phone out of my pocket, unlocked it, and dialed Marilyn Caldwell. I put it on speaker and held it flat in my hand, like a weapon. It rang twice. "Hello, darling." Mom's voice filled the kitchen, cheerful and oblivious. "Did you see the surprise? Tessa said they beat you there. Isn't it wonderful?" "Mom," I said, "why are Tessa and Gavin moving their furniture into my house?" The line went quiet for a heartbeat. Then her tone shifted. It became the voice she used when I was a teenager and refused to share my allowance. The voice of disappointed authority. "Brianna, do not start this," she said. "You are being selfish. I raised you better than that." "I am being selfish because I want to live in the house I bought?" I asked. "You are a single woman with no children," Mom snapped. "Your sister has a family. She has 2 growing babies. Gavin is trying to build a future for them, and he needs a leg up. He needs the right image. You have more than enough space. You have a steady job. You have savings. It is your duty to help them." "My duty?" I repeated, like it was my duty to pay off Gavin's credit card debt 3 years ago, or when I funded the frozen yogurt franchise that lasted 4 months. "That is in the past." Mom's voice rose an octave. "Why do you always bring up old history? Gavin has learned. This AI business is different. This is the future, Brianna. And this house is an opportunity for the whole family to rise up together. You should be proud to host them. Instead, you are acting like a miser." "I am not hosting them. Mom, they are moving in. They have a truck." "And they should," she said. "It makes no sense to pay 2 mortgages in one family. You save money. They save money. It is logical. I gave them the key because I knew you would be difficult about it. And I knew that once you saw them there, once you saw your niece and nephew happy in a big yard, you would understand. You would do the right thing. I looked at Gavin. He was nodding along with the phone, looking vindicated. Tessa was crossing her arms, looking like the victim. The right thing, I said, would have been to ask me. If I asked, you would have said no, Mom said, as if this justified everything. Just let them settle in. Brianna, don't make a scene. The neighbors are watching. Don't embarrass us. I hung up. The silence that followed was heavy. The kids had stopped running and were watching us from the hallway, sensing the tension. See, Gavin said, spreading his hands. Marilyn gets it. It is a win-win. I get the office, Tessa gets the help with the kids, and you get, well, you get us, family. I looked at the pizza box again. I looked at the mud on the floor. I looked at the entitlement etched into their faces. They truly believed this. They believed that my hard work was a community resource. Gavin, I said, pack your things. Tell the movers to put everything back on the truck. You are leaving, now. Gavin chuckled, a low, disbelief-filled sound. Bree, come on. Be realistic. The truck is empty. The guys are already on their break. We are not moving everything out. I am not asking, I said. Tessa stepped forward. Her face had hardened. The bubbly sister act dropped, replaced by the steeliness she used whenever she wanted something expensive. We can't leave, Brianna, she said. You certainly can, I said. You have a rental apartment. No, Tessa said. She lifted her chin. We gave notice on the apartment 3 days ago. The landlord has already listed it. We have nowhere else to go. I stared at her. That is not my problem. And, Tessa continued, her voice rising, delivering the final blow she had clearly been saving. We already transferred the kids' school registration. I submitted the paperwork to the Sierra Crest district office on Monday using this address. They start here next week. Leo is already enrolled in the soccer program down the street. She looked at me with triumph. She thought she had locked me in. She thought that by weaving the children into the deception, by entangling the bureaucracy of schools and leases, she had made it impossible for me to say no without looking like a monster. We are here, Brianna, Tessa said, picking up a slice of pizza and taking a bite. Everything is unpacked halfway. The kids are registered. There is no turning back now. So you might as well tell us which room you want, because Gavin already set up his desk in the library. I looked at her chewing that pizza in my kitchen. I looked at Gavin smirking. They thought the paperwork was a trap for me. They did not realize that by registering the kids at this address and canceling their lease without my signature on a single document, they had just handed me the ammunition for a nuclear strike. But I did not tell them that, not yet. You transferred the schools, I said softly. Done and dusted, Gavin said. And you gave up your apartment. Keys are in the mail, Tessa said. I nodded slowly. I needed them to feel safe. I needed them to feel like they had won, so they would stop guarding their flanks. Fine, I said. Gavin clapped his hands again. That is the spirit. I knew you would come around. Hey, grab a slice. It is pepperoni. I turned away from them, walking toward the large glass sliding doors that looked out over the valley. I need a moment, I said. I am going to check the perimeter. Take your time, Gavin called out. I will direct the movers to put your bed in the guest room for now. The master has better light for Tessa's yoga. I stepped out onto the deck and slid the door shut. The mountain air was crisp, cooling the heat in my face. Through the glass, I watched them. Gavin was high-fiving the movers. Tessa was wiping the pizza grease from her hands onto her jeans and pointing at my living room walls, planning where to hang her pictures. They were celebrating. I looked down at my phone. The recording was saved. I had the confession. I had the admission of the key. I had the admission of the school fraud, because you cannot register a child in a district where you do not legally reside without showing a deed or a lease, which meant they had forged something. I was not just fighting a family squabble anymore. I was holding evidence of fraud. I took a deep breath, scrolling through my contacts until I found the name I needed. Elliot Graves, attorney at law. I did not call him yet. I had one more layer of the trap to set. I needed them to dig themselves in so deep that when the earth collapsed, they wouldn't just fall, they would be buried. I turned back to the glass. Gavin was now sitting in my favorite armchair, boots up on the ottoman. I smiled. It was a cold, small smile that nobody saw. Enjoy the seat. Gavin, I thought, it is going to be the most expensive sit of your life. I stood on the deck, the cold glass of the sliding door pressing against my forehead, watching the pantomime of domestic happiness unfolding in my living room. Gavin was laughing, throwing his head back as he instructed a mover on the proper angle for a lamp. Tessa was unpacking a box of throw pillows, fluffing them with the contentment of a woman nesting. They looked so comfortable. They looked like they belonged. But they did not see the ghost standing next to them. They did not see the 6 years of grit, sweat, and humiliation that had paid for the floorboards they were currently scuffing. To understand why I did not shatter the glass and drag them out by their collars right then and there, you have to understand the cost of this house. I did not buy this place with a lottery ticket. I did not buy it with an inheritance. I bought it with my life. For the last 6 years, while Gavin was chasing his delusions of grandeur and Tessa was playing the role of the overwhelmed suburban mother, I was at war. My battlefield was the construction sites of Northridge Terrain Studio. I was a project manager, a title that sounds clean and corporate, but the reality was dust, noise, and the constant, grinding friction of being a young woman in an industry dominated by men who had been pouring concrete since before I was born. I remembered a Tuesday in July 3 years ago. It was 95 degrees with 80% humidity. I was standing in a muddy trench in steel-toed boots, arguing with a foreman named Rick, who refused to install the drainage pipe according to my schematic because he thought he knew better. He had called me sweetheart 4 times in 10 minutes. I had grit in my teeth. My blazer was stained with sweat. I was exhausted, dehydrated, and furious. But I stood in that trench for 2 hours until he dug it up and did it right, because if I didn't, the retaining wall would fail, and it would be my signature on the lawsuit. I lived like a monk to survive that life. While my peers were posting photos of their trips to Tulum or their new luxury leases in the city, I was eating rice and beans 5 nights a week. I drove a Honda Civic that rattled so hard at 60 miles per hour, I thought the doors would fly off. I learned to cut my own hair. I stopped buying clothes. I declined every invitation to be a bridesmaid because I could not justify the $500 for a dress I would wear once. I became boring. I became the cheap friend. I disappeared from the social scene because every cocktail, every movie ticket, every Uber ride was calculated against the down payment fund. I did this because I knew it was the only way out. In the Caldwell family, money is not personal property. It is a communal resource, managed by the emotional tyranny of my mother, Marilyn. Growing up, the rule was unspoken but absolute. If you have, you must give. If you're strong, you must carry the weak. And in the narrative my mother spun, Tessa and Gavin were always the weak, fragile birds that needed protection, and I was the draft horse bred to pull the cart. I looked through the glass at Gavin. He was pointing at the fireplace now, explaining something to my nephew. I remembered the craft brewery phase. That was 4 years ago. Gavin had convinced Mom that he was going to be the next big thing in artisanal IPAs. Mom had come to me, tears in her eyes, telling me that Gavin finally had a purpose, that this was his shot, and that we needed to support his dream. That support cost me $10,000. I wrote the check because I was 28 and still believed that buying their happiness would eventually earn me my freedom. The brewery never opened. Gavin spent the money on high-end brewing equipment that he used twice, and a branding consultant who turned out to be his buddy from college. When the money ran out, he shrugged and moved on to the next dream, a drone photography business, then a drop-shipping empire, then crypto. Each time, he failed. Each time, Tessa cried. Each time. Mom turned to me and said, "Brianna, you have a good job. You can afford to help. Family sticks together." And I did. I paid their rent when Gavin forgot to transfer the funds. I paid for the kids' dental work. I paid for the car repairs. I became their safety net, their bank, and their doormat. But 2 years ago, something broke inside me. I was sitting in my studio apartment, eating instant noodles, staring at a bank statement that showed I had barely saved anything that year, despite working 60-hour weeks. I realized then that I was not saving for a future. I was working myself to the bone to subsidize Gavin's laziness and Tessa's refusal to grow up. I realized that as long as my money was liquid, as long as it was sitting in a bank account where Mom could guilt me into accessing it, I would never be free. They would bleed me dry, dollar by dollar, crisis by crisis, until I was just as hollowed out as they were. That was the day I decided to buy the house. This house in Sierra Crest was not just real estate, it was a vault. It was a way to lock my labor into something they could not swipe a card to access. It was my severance package from the family dynamic. I wanted a place where the walls were thick enough to keep out the guilt trips, where the doors locked from the inside, where I could wake up in the morning and know that everything I saw belonged to me, and me alone. I kept it a secret because I knew exactly what Marilyn would do if she found out before the ink was dry. She would not congratulate me. She would calculate the square footage. She would do exactly what she did this morning, assess the asset, and redistribute it to the needy members of the collective. If I had told them a month ago, "No, you cannot move in," Mom would have launched the smear campaign immediately. She is a master of the narrative. She would have called every aunt, uncle, and cousin. She would have told them that Brianna has changed, that Brianna thinks she is better than everyone else, that Brianna is letting her sister's children starve in the street while she sits in a glass castle. She would have turned me into the villain before I even unpacked a box. That is why I was standing on the deck, silent, watching them violate my sanctuary. I needed them to cross the line so completely, so publicly, that no amount of spin could save them. I needed Gavin to play the big man. I needed Tessa to act the entitled princess. I needed Mom to issue the orders. I needed them to feel so safe, so victorious, that they would expose their true nature to the world. I looked at the folder of documents in my bag. I touched the cold screen of my phone in my pocket. My heart was not racing anymore. The anger that had surged when I first drove up the driveway had crystallized into something colder and harder. It felt like the steel beams holding up this deck. Solid, unshakable. For 34 years, I had apologized for my success. I had dimmed my light so it would not shine in their eyes. I had made myself smaller so they would feel bigger. I watched Gavin put his feet up on the coffee table. My coffee table. Never again. I whispered to the wind. This time, there would be no negotiation. There would be no loaning them the guest room for a few weeks until they got back on their feet. There would be no covering the moving costs to keep the peace. There would be no understanding Gavin's vision. I was done being the daughter who fixed things. Today, I was going to be the daughter who broke things. I watched Tessa laugh at something Gavin said. She looked so happy, thinking she had successfully executed a coup. She thought that because they were inside, because the pizza was on the counter and the kids were running on the floor, they had won. She relied on the old Brianna, the Brianna who valued peace over self-respect. She did not know that the old Brianna died the moment I saw that truck in the driveway. I turned away from the glass. I adjusted my blazer, feeling the fabric that I had worn to countless site meetings, the armor of my trade. I was ready. I had the evidence. I had the law. And for the first time in my life, I had absolutely no desire to be a good sister. I slid the glass door open and stepped back into the cool, climate-controlled air of the living room. "Hey," Gavin shouted, not bothering to get up. "We were just saying, this place needs a bigger TV, maybe 70 inches for the wall. I can look for a deal." "We will see," I said, my voice smooth, betraying nothing of the storm that was about to break. "Why don't you get comfortable? I have a few calls to make." "Call the cable company," Tessa chirped. "We need cartoons for the kids." "I am calling someone much more important than the cable company," I said. I walked toward the kitchen, my heels clicking on the floor, marking the rhythm of a countdown they could not hear. The flashback was over. The work was done. Now, it was time for the demolition. The most dangerous thing you can do in a war is let your enemy believe they have outsmarted you. 2 weeks ago, when my mother, Marilyn, sat at her kitchen table and asked for the spare key to my new house, she thought she was maneuvering a naive daughter. She had made me tea. She had put out a plate of the oatmeal cookies I used to like when I was 12. She smiled that soft, maternal smile that usually preceded a request for a wire transfer. "It is just for peace of mind, Brianna," she had said, her hand resting gently on my arm. "What if you are stuck at a site visit and the pipes freeze? What if you need someone to let a contractor in? I just want to be able to water the plants and dust for you. I want to help." I had looked at her. I saw the calculation in her eyes. I knew, with absolute certainty, that she had no intention of watering plants. She wanted access. She wanted a foothold. In the past, I would have argued. I would have said no, which would have led to crying, guilt trips, and eventually, me caving in just to stop the noise. But this time, I did not argue. I reached into my purse and handed her the shiny new key. "Thanks, Mom," I said. "That is really thoughtful of you." She beamed, clutching the metal like it was a winning lottery ticket. She thought she had won. She thought the gate was open. She did not know that 10 minutes after I left her driveway, I was not driving home. I was driving to the downtown office of Elliot Graves, the most ruthless real estate attorney in Briarwood. I had called Elliot 3 days prior. I told him, "My family has boundary issues. I am buying a property, and I need to ensure that what is mine is yours does not apply legally." When I walked into his office that afternoon, 2 weeks ago, I laid the key transfer out for him. "She has the key," I told Elliot. "She thinks it is for emergencies, but I know my sister. Within a month of me moving in, they will try to establish residency." Elliot, a man who wore suits that cost more than my first car, nodded. "If they have a key and they move furniture in, police will often call it a civil matter. They will say it is a landlord-tenant dispute and refuse to remove them without an eviction order. That can take 6 months." "I do not have 6 months," I said. "Then we prepare for a criminal trespass," Elliot said. He opened a file on his mahogany desk. "We need to make the legal standing so crystal clear that a patrol officer can read it in 30 seconds and make an arrest." We spent the next 2 hours building a fortress of paper. First, the deed. We reviewed the title to ensure it was solely in my name. Brianna Caldwell. No trust, no cosigner, no familial loopholes. Second, the financial trail. I provided Elliot with 3 years of bank statements showing that every single cent of the down payment, the closing costs, and the inspections came from my personal salary. There was not a single transfer from my parents, not a dime from Gavin. We created a notarized affidavit stating that no financial contribution had been made by any other party, preemptively killing the argument that they helped pay for it. Third, and most importantly, the notice against trespass. Elliot drafted a document that was terrifying in its specificity. It explicitly revoked any implied license for Marilyn, Tessa, or Gavin to enter the property for any purpose other than a scheduled social visit while I was present. It stated that possession of a key did not constitute a lease agreement. "Keep this in a folder," Elliot instructed me, handing over the heavy stack of documents. "Do not show it to them yet. Let them commit the act. Let them move the furniture. Let them verify to a third party, like a mover or a neighbor, that they intend to live there without your permission. Once they do that, they have crossed from an annoying family visit into criminal intent." I took the folder. "What about the security system?" I asked. "Should I install cameras now?" Elliot had paused, tapping his pen on the desk. "If you install them now, they will ask for the code. If you refuse, they will say you are being paranoid. If you give it, they can delete footage. No, schedule the installation for the day after you move in." "Why?" "Because," Elliot smiled, a shark-like expression, "you want them to feel unobserved. People are sloppy when they think no one is watching. Let them break in. Let them get comfortable. Let them incriminate themselves." So, I did exactly that. I scheduled the security team for tomorrow morning. I left the house vulnerable today on purpose. I set the trap, and I baited it with the one thing I knew they could not resist: an unguarded, expensive asset. Standing in my kitchen now, watching Tessa rearrange my life, I felt the weight of that folder in my bag. It was right next to my laptop. It contained the photos I had taken yesterday, time-stamped images of every room, empty and pristine, proving that as of 24 hours ago, this house was 100% mine and unoccupied. It contained the video I had just shot in the driveway. It contained the inventory list I had quietly compiled of Tessa's furniture from visiting her apartment, so I could identify exactly what was hers and what was mine. I was not a victim here. I was a prosecutor waiting for the defense to rest. Brianna? Hello? Earth to Brianna? Tessa snapped her fingers in front of my face. I blinked, pulling myself out of the memory of Elliot's office. Sorry, I said. I was thinking. Well, stop thinking and start helping, Tessa said. She was standing by the custom cabinetry I had spent 3 weeks designing. She had opened 2 of the upper doors and was frowning. This storage is not going to work for us. Is that so? I asked. It is too high, she complained. The kids can't reach the cereal, and Gavin needs a dedicated shelf for his supplements. We are going to have to reorganize this. She pointed a manicured finger toward the basement door. I was thinking you could move your stuff downstairs. You know, your fancy espresso machine and your fragile dishes. The basement has a kitchenette, right? It would be perfect for you. That way, we can keep the main kitchen kid-friendly. We can put a gate up here and make this the family zone. I stared at her. The audacity was so physically palpable it felt like a slap. She was kicking me out of my own kitchen. You want me to move my kitchen equipment to the basement, I repeated, making sure I had it on the record. It just makes sense, Bree, Tessa said, her tone dripping with that condescending practicality she learned from Mom. You are one person. You grab a coffee and go. We cook meals. We need the space. Besides, the basement is cooler. It is like a little studio apartment down there. You will like it. It will feel just like your old place. There it was, the unconscious cruelty. It will feel just like your old place. She wanted to put me back in the box I had just climbed out of. She wanted me to be the basement-dwelling spinster while she played Lady of the Manor in the sunlight. And, she added, Gavin thinks we should turn the breakfast nook into a homework station for Leo. So if you have any plants or decorations there, just move them out, okay? I looked over at the breakfast nook. It was the spot I had visualized for months. I had imagined sitting there on Sunday mornings, reading the paper, watching the sun come up over the ridge. Now, Gavin's gym bag was thrown on the bench, and a box of toys was already spilling onto the floor. A normal person would have screamed. A normal person would have thrown the pizza box at the wall and demanded they get out. But I did not feel hot anger anymore. I felt a cold, electric thrill. Every word she spoke was another nail in the coffin Elliot and I had built. Every demand she made confirmed that this was not a visit. This was a hostile takeover. She was proving intent. She was proving that she planned to displace the owner. Okay, I said. Tessa looked surprised. She had expected a fight. She had her arguments ready. My compliance threw her off balance. Okay, she asked. If that is what you think is best, I said, keeping my face completely blank, I will not stand in the way of the children's comfort. Tessa beamed. She turned to Gavin, who was now measuring the wall for his imaginary television. See, babe, I told you she would be reasonable once she saw the logic. She is fine with the basement. Great, Gavin shouted. Hey, Bree, since you are heading down there, can you grab a box of cables from the truck? I think I left them near the ramp. I looked at him. You want me to unload your truck? Just the light stuff, he said, waving a hand. Save your back. I nodded. I will go outside, I said, but not to get cables. Whatever, Gavin said, turning back to the wall. I walked toward the front door. My heart was beating a slow, steady rhythm. Thump, thump, thump. They had no idea. They thought they were moving in. They thought they had successfully bullied their way into $1 million asset. They thought the hardest part was over. As I reached for the door handle, I glanced back at them. Tessa was taking my spice jars out of the rack and replacing them with plastic sippy cups. Gavin was scratching his back, looking out at my view. They looked so permanent. I gripped the handle of my bag, feeling the hard edge of the folder inside. Go ahead, I thought. Unpack the boxes, put your clothes in the drawers, register the kids for school, make yourself at home. Because the more comfortable you get, the more it is going to hurt when the floor drops out. I opened the door and stepped out onto the porch. The movers were still hauling boxes. A man walked past me carrying a mattress, the mattress my sister and her husband slept on. I walked past him, down the steps, and stood in the center of the driveway. I took my phone out. I checked the time. It was 11 o'clock. I had given them 3 hours. That was enough. They had established presence. They had verbalized intent. They had moved furniture. The trap was full. I unlocked my phone and tapped the contact for Elliot Graves. Then, I tapped the contact for the non-emergency police line that Elliot had told me to use, the one that dispatched the sheriff's deputies who handled property disputes in Sierra Crest, not the city cops who might be too busy. I looked at the house one more time. It looked beautiful. Even with the ugly truck in front of it, it was a monument to my freedom, and today, I was going to baptize it, not with champagne, but with justice. I dialed the number. Sheriff's Department, the dispatcher answered. My name is Brianna Caldwell, I said, my voice clear and ringing in the mountain air. I am the sole owner of the property at 42 Sierra Crest Drive. I have returned home to find intruders in my house. I have documentation proving ownership, and I have intruders who are refusing to leave. I am requesting immediate assistance. I hung up. Then, I turned back to the movers who were walking up the ramp. Gentlemen, I said loud enough for them to hear, I would recommend you take a break. You are not going to be paid for the rest of this day. One of the movers stopped, a lamp in his hands. What? I said stop, I told him, locking eyes with him. Because the police are on their way, and unless you want to be named as accessories to a criminal trespass, I suggest you put that lamp down on the pavement and step away from my house. The mover looked at me. He looked at the house. He looked at the determination in my face. Slowly, very slowly, he set the lamp down. The game was over. The execution had begun. I walked back into the living room, the cool mountain air following me in through the open door. The atmosphere inside had shifted from chaotic to celebratory, oblivious to the call I had just made in the driveway. Gavin was pacing the length of the main atrium, his voice booming as he spoke into his phone. He had adopted his CEO voice, a tone that was half an octave deeper than his natural register, designed to project authority he did not possess. Yeah, Mike, it is a done deal, Gavin said, laughing loudly. We just got the keys today. You have to come see the view. It is unreal. Listen, bring the guys over tonight. We are going to christen the place properly. Yeah, a little housewarming. Serious investors only, right? We can talk about the Series A on the deck. He hung up and turned to me, his face flushed with the dopamine hit of pretending to be a mogul. He clapped his hands together, rubbing them briskly. Okay, change of plans, he announced, acting as if he were addressing a subordinate. Mike and the partners are coming over around 7 o'clock. We need to pivot from unpacking to hosting. Brianna, I need you to handle the catering. I stared at him. The catering, I repeated flatly. Yeah, just keep it simple, Gavin said, waving a hand dismissively. We do not need a sit-down dinner. Just get some high-end charcuterie, maybe some shrimp cocktails, and booze. We need good scotch. Do not buy the cheap stuff. Brianna, these guys know their liquor. Treat this as an investment in the family business. When I land this funding, it pays off for everyone. He did not ask. He ordered. He expected me to drive back down the mountain, spend $500 of my own money on food and alcohol for his imaginary business partners, and then presumably serve it to them in my own home while he took credit for the venue. Before I could respond, Tessa came bustling out of the master suite. She was holding a tape measure and looking flushed. Gavin, the master closet is huge, she squealed. We can definitely fit both our wardrobes in there. She turned to me, her expression shifting to one of benevolent charity. Bree, I was thinking, since you are going to be in the basement, or the guest room, if the basement is too damp, we should move your bed now. I want to get the master suite set up for us before the kids get tired. It is just better for their routine if they are near the main bathroom. You understand, right? You are just one person. You do not need a double vanity and a soaking tub. It is wasted on you. I looked from Gavin to Tessa. They were rewriting reality in real time, in their minds. I had already capitulated. I was already the tenant in the basement. Let me get this straight, I said, my voice cutting through their excitement like a razor. You want me to buy liquor for your party tonight, and you want me to give you the master bedroom of the house I purchased. It is not about wanting, Brianna, Tessa said with a sigh, as if explaining gravity to a toddler. It is about needs. We have a family. You have work. It is just logistics. I took a step closer to them. I raised my phone, ensuring the camera lens was clearly visible. Tell me, I said, keeping my voice terrifyingly calm. Would you two dare to say those exact words in front of the neighbors? The room went quiet. Gavin frowned, his brow furrowing. What? If I walked next door right now, I said, pointing to the property on the left, and I brought the neighbor in here, would you look him in the eye and tell him that you are forcing the legal owner of this house into the basement? Would you tell him that you are demanding I serve you shrimp cocktail while you squat in my living room? Or would you be ashamed? Gavin's face darkened. You are being dramatic. This is family business. It stays inside. Does it? I asked. Suddenly, the front door flew open. My mother, Marilyn, stormed in. She must have been parked down the street, waiting for the signal that the invasion was successful. She was wearing her church clothes, a floral blouse and pressed slacks, but her face was twisted in a scowl that I knew well. She marched straight up to me, her purse swinging aggressively at her side. Brianna Marie Caldwell, she snapped. I saw you outside harassing those poor movers. What is wrong with you? I was not harassing them, I said. I was informing them of the law. Marilyn saw the phone in my hand. Her eyes widened. Are you recording this? Put that down. Immediately. She reached out to grab my wrist, but I took a sharp step back. Do not touch me, I said. Marilyn froze, shocked by the physical boundary I had just set. She was used to a daughter who shrank, not one who dodged. You are embarrassing this family, Marilyn hissed, lowering her voice but increasing the intensity. Look at your sister. Look at Gavin. They are trying to build a life. They are trying to be happy. And here you are, standing in the middle of this beautiful blessing, trying to ruin it with your selfishness. Why can't you just share? Why do you have to be so greedy? I bought this house, Mother, I said. With money I earned. Standing in my own living room is not greed. It is greed when you have so much and they have so little, Marilyn shouted. You are single. You have no one. What are you going to do with 4 bedrooms? Fill them with your ego? Put that phone away and apologize to your brother-in-law. He is trying to secure a future for your niece and nephew, and you are acting like a petulant child. Gavin, emboldened by Marilyn's arrival, puffed out his chest. He turned toward the front door where the movers were tentatively standing, unsure whether to bring in the next load. Hey, Gavin yelled at them. Ignore her. I am the man of the house. I am the one giving the orders. Bring the rest of the stuff in. We are on a schedule here. He looked at me with a smug grin. See, Bree? Nobody listens to a hysteric. I am the owner now. Possession is the law. He actually believed it. He believed that by declaring himself the patriarch, the world would bend to his will. I did not scream. I did not cry. I did not stomp my foot. I simply looked at the movers. If you bring one more item across that threshold, I said, my voice steady and cold, you will be liable for damages. The lead mover looked at Gavin, then at me. He set the box down on the porch. He did not come in. Gavin turned red. I am telling you to bring it in. Stop, I said. Make me. Gavin stepped into my personal space, using his height to intimidate me. "What are you going to do, Brianna? Throw us out physically? You can't. We are here. We are staying. The party is tonight. Get used to it." Tessa joined the fray, realizing that intimidation was their only card left. She decided to play the emotional trump card. "Is this what you want, Brianna?" she cried out, her voice cracking theatrically. "Do you want to throw Leo and Mia out on the street? Do you want them to go back to that tiny apartment with the mold in the bathroom? Do you hate my children that much? Are you that cruel?" It was a masterful performance. In any other timeline, this would have been the moment I broke. This was the weapon they had used for a decade, the accusation that my boundaries were acts of violence against the children. Marilyn nodded vigorously. "She is heartless, Tessa. She has always been cold. She cares more about her bank account than her own blood." They stood there, a united front of toxicity, Gavin the bully, Tessa the victim, and Marilyn the judge. They waited for me to crumble. They waited for the apology. I looked at Tessa, who was wiping a dry eye. I looked at Gavin, who was vibrating with aggressive energy. I looked at my mother, who looked at me with pure disdain. I felt absolutely nothing for them. The cord was cut. "I do not hate the children," I said, "and I am not cruel." "Then let us stay," Tessa shouted. I looked at my watch. It had been 12 minutes since I made the call. The station was 15 minutes away on a winding road. "I am done arguing," I said. "I am done negotiating, and I am certainly done catering." "So what?" Gavin sneered. "You are just going to stand there and pout?" I walked over to the kitchen island, picked up the greasy pizza box, and dropped it into the trash can. The thud echoed in the silence. "No," I said, turning back to face them. "I am going to wait." "Wait for what?" Marilyn demanded. I looked her dead in the eyes. "I will let the law speak." As if on cue, the sound of a heavy engine growled up the driveway. It was not a moving truck. It was distinct, powerful, and authoritative. Blue lights flashed against the living room windows, reflecting off the glass walls, painting Gavin's confused face in alternating strobes of azure and white. The room froze. Gavin looked out the window. His jaw dropped. "Is that—" he stammered. "The police," I finished for him. Tessa gasped. Marilyn grabbed the back of the sofa for support. "You called the cops on your own family?" Marilyn whispered, her voice trembling with genuine shock. "You actually called the police?" "No, Mom," I said, checking the recording one last time to make sure the blue lights were visible in the frame. "I called the police on the intruders in my home." I walked toward the front door to greet the officers. "Game over," I whispered. The blue lights were pulsing against the living room walls, a rhythmic strobe of authority that turned Gavin's face from pale to gray in alternating flashes. The silence in the room was absolute, broken only by the hum of the refrigerator and the heavy, panicked breathing of my sister. I did not move toward the door to let the police in immediately. I wanted the pressure to build. I wanted the reality of the situation to soak into their bones like the cold mountain air. I lifted my phone again. The screen was still glowing. I had already dispatched the police, but there was one more call to make, and this one was not for safety. This one was for total destruction. I dialed Elliot Graves. I pressed the speakerphone icon, but I kept the volume low, just loud enough to be a buzz in the quiet room, forcing them to strain their ears to hear it. "Mr. Graves," I said. My voice was calm, projecting a terrifying clarity that bounced off the high ceilings. "I am currently at the property. The intruders are present. The police have arrived on the scene. I am activating the trespassing protocol we prepared." I paused, letting the words hang there. "Yes," I continued, looking directly at Gavin. "I have the deed. I have the affidavit of sole ownership, and I have the recording of the male subject claiming ownership to third parties. We will be proceeding with the civil suit for damages alongside the criminal complaint." Gavin took a step back. The word criminal hit him like a physical blow. He laughed, but it was a wet, shaky sound. "You are bluffing," he stammered, his hands twitching at his sides. "You are talking to a dial tone. Brianna, you would not sue your own family. This is ridiculous. It is a family dispute. The cops are going to laugh at you and tell you to work it out over coffee." I did not answer him. I simply ended the call and reached into my oversized leather tote bag. Slowly, deliberately, I pulled out the black legal folder. It was thick, heavy with the weight of notarized paper. The cover was embossed with gold lettering, Graves and Associates, Real Estate Litigation. I walked over to the dining table, the one they had cluttered with their keys and sunglasses, and cleared a space with a sweep of my arm. I dropped the folder onto the wood. Thud. The sound was heavy. It sounded like a gavel. "Read it," I said. Tessa stepped forward, her eyes darting from the folder to me. She knew that logo. Everyone in Briarwood knew Elliot Graves. He was the lawyer you hired when you wanted to burn the earth so nothing would ever grow there again. "Bree," Tessa whispered, her voice trembling, "why do you have a file from Elliot Graves? That is serious legal stuff. That is for lawsuits." "It is for evictions," I corrected her, "and for restraining orders." Tessa reached out and flipped the cover open. The first document was the notice against trespass, with her name, Gavin's name, and Marilyn's name printed in bold, black ink at the top. Below that was the draft for a lawsuit claiming damages for unlawful detainer and theft of services. She gasped, pulling her hand back as if the paper were hot. "You prepared this," she said, looking up at me with horror. You had this ready. You knew we were coming." "I knew you were predictable," I said. This was the moment the dynamic shifted. Up until now, they thought this was an emotional battle. They thought they were fighting a jealous sister who could be bullied into submission. Now, they realized they were fighting a legal entity that had anticipated their every move. Marilyn, who had been standing by the window watching the police car, turned around. She saw the fear on Tessa's face. She saw the folder. Her tactical mind, honed by years of manipulating relatives and guilt-tripping neighbors, instantly switched gears. The screaming matriarch vanished. In her place appeared the wounded, reasonable mother. She walked over to me, her step soft, her hands clasped in a pleading gesture. She lowered her voice to a sugary, conspiratorial whisper. "Brianna, honey," she cooed, trying to herd me away from the center of the room, toward the hallway. "Let's just take a breath. Let's go into the other room, just you and me. We do not need to do this in front of everyone. We can fix this. Just tell the officers it was a misunderstanding. Tell them we are just leaving. We can talk about the house later." She tried to touch my elbow, to guide me into the shadows where she could work her magic, where she could cry, beg, and remind me of how she labored for 18 hours to give birth to me. I planted my feet. I did not move an inch. "No," I said loudly. Marilyn flinched. "Shh, keep your voice down. The movers." "I want the movers to hear," I said, pitching my voice to carry to the open front door where the crew was watching with wide eyes. "I want everyone to hear. There are no private conversations today. Mother, everything happens in the light." I gestured to the folder. "You wanted to be part of this house? Well, now you are part of the legal record." The movers, 3 large men who had been silent observers until now, began to shift uncomfortably. They had seen family arguments before, but this was different. This felt like a trap springing shut. "Hey, boss," one of the movers whispered to his colleague, nudging him. "Look at the papers. That is a court seal. This ain't just a spat. This house has paperwork issues." "We need to get paid," the other one muttered back. "If the cops impound the truck—" "We are not unloading another box," the foreman announced, stepping back onto the porch. "We are staying right here until the deputies clear this." Gavin heard them. He spun around, panic finally overriding his arrogance. No, you guys keep working. I am paying you double. Ignore her." He looked at me, his eyes wild. "Brianna, call them off. Seriously, you made your point. You are the big bad wolf. Congratulations. Now send the cops away before you ruin my reputation. Do you know what it looks like to have police at a founder's house? It looks like the founder is a fraud, I said. I am not a fraud, Gavin shouted, his voice cracking. I am your brother-in-law. I am family. You are treating us like criminals. If you walk into a house you do not own and refuse to leave, I said, then you are a criminal. The definition is quite simple. I walked over to the kitchen island and leaned against it, crossing my arms. I looked at the three of them, Gavin sweating, Tessa crying over the legal documents, and Marilyn vibrating with suppressed rage because her manipulation tactics had bounced off me like water off sealed concrete. Outside the massive glass windows, I could see activity. The neighbors across the street, a retired judge and his wife, had come out onto their porch. They were watching the police cruiser. They were looking at the rental truck blocking the road. They were pointing at my house. Look, I said, nodding toward the window. The audience is here. You wanted a housewarming? You wanted the neighborhood to know the Caldwell Pike family had arrived? Well, they know. You witch, Marilyn hissed, the mask slipping completely. You spiteful, jealous little witch. You planned this whole thing to humiliate us. I planned this to protect myself, I replied. The humiliation? That is something you brought on yourselves. All you had to do was ask. All you had to do was respect the word no. But you couldn't do that, so here we are. The blue lights stopped flashing, replaced by the steady, bright glare of the police spotlights cutting through the living room, illuminating the dust motes in the air. A heavy car door slammed outside, then another. The sound of boots crunching on the gravel driveway was audible through the open door. Heavy, purposeful steps. Tessa looked up from the papers, her face streaked with mascara. Brianna, please, she sobbed, but it was a weak, defeated sound. The kids, the school. The school registration was fraud. Tessa, I said coldly. You might want to call the district before they call you. Gavin looked for a way out. He glanced at the back door, then at the basement stairs, but there was nowhere to go. He was trapped in the glass box he had so desperately wanted to claim. I stood up straight. I smoothed my blazer. I picked up the folder from the table, holding it like a shield. Prepare yourselves, I said. The law is knocking. And then, 3 sharp, authoritative raps echoed from the front door frame. Knock, knock, knock. Sheriff's Department, a deep voice boomed. Step out where we can see your hands. I looked at Gavin. He was trembling. Go on, I said, gesturing to the door. You told the movers you were the man of the house. Go answer the door. He didn't move. He couldn't move. So I walked past him, my head held high, and went to greet the officers who were about to validate every single sacrifice I had made for the last 6 years. 2 uniformed deputies stepped into the foyer. They were large men, wearing the tan and green uniforms of the sheriff's department, with radios crackling on their shoulders and utility belts that creaked with the weight of equipment. They did not look like they were in the mood for a housewarming party. They looked like men who had been interrupted in the middle of their lunch break to deal with a domestic disturbance. The atmosphere in the living room did not just cool down, it froze. The air conditioning system hummed, but the sudden drop in temperature came from the sheer, terrifying reality of law enforcement standing on the doormat. Tessa was the first to react. It was a reflex born of a lifetime of avoiding consequences. She wiped the tears from her face instantly, composing herself into the image of a harassed, upper-middle-class mother. She stepped over a box of books, smoothing her sweater, and walked toward the officers with a look of desperate relief. Officers, thank God you are here, Tessa said, her voice trembling with a perfect mix of exhaustion and fear. We have been trying to de-escalate the situation for an hour. My sister is having some kind of episode. She is very unstable right now. We are just trying to move our family in, and she is blocking the doorway and shouting at the workers. It is really scaring my children. It was a brilliant lie. She banked on the assumption that the police would see a family unit, a mother, a father, a grandmother, and assume the solitary woman in the blazer was the outlier, the problem. Gavin saw the opening and took it. He puffed out his chest, adjusted his collar, and walked forward with the swagger of a man who believes he is peers with authority figures. He extended a hand toward the lead deputy, a man with a gray buzz cut and a name tag that read Miller. "Officer, good to see you," Gavin said, putting on his best business casual charm. "I am Gavin Pike. I am the homeowner here. Sorry about the confusion. We have a family member who is a little off her meds, if you know what I mean. We were just explaining to her that she needs to leave the premises so we can finish unloading." Deputy Miller did not shake Gavin's hand. He did not smile. He looked at Gavin's outstretched palm, then looked at Gavin's face with flat, unblinking eyes. "You are the homeowner?" Miller asked. His voice was a low rumble, devoid of any warmth. "Yes, sir," Gavin said, dropping his hand but keeping the smile plastered on his face. "Just got the keys. Exciting day, right? Anyway, if you could just escort her off the property, we can get back to it. I hate to waste tax dollars on a family squabble." The second deputy, a younger man named Rodriguez, was already scanning the room. His eyes landed on the movers standing by the door, then on Marilyn, who was clutching her purse like a shield, and finally on me. I did not scream. I did not interrupt Tessa's performance or Gavin's lies. I waited until Gavin had spoken those specific words, "I am the homeowner," and then I stepped forward. I walked past the kitchen island, moving with the precision of a soldier on a drill field. I stood 3 feet away from Deputy Miller. I did not look at Gavin. I looked directly at the badge. "Officer Miller, my name is Brianna Caldwell." I said clearly, "I am the sole legal owner of this property. The people you see here are intruders who have entered my home without my permission and are refusing to vacate." Tessa let out a sharp, incredulous laugh. "She is lying. She is jealous. Mom, tell them." Marilyn opened her mouth to speak, to spin her web, but I cut the air with the black folder. I placed it directly into Deputy Miller's hand. "This is the deed to the property, recorded yesterday at the county clerk's office," I said. "Behind it is a notarized affidavit of ownership. Behind that is a formal notice against trespass that has been prepared by my attorney, Elliot Graves." The name Elliot Graves landed in the room like a grenade. Deputy Miller's eyebrows went up a fraction of an inch. He knew the name. Every cop in the county knew the name. Graves was not a lawyer you hired for a family spat. He was the lawyer you hired when you wanted to destroy someone legally. Miller opened the folder. The room went silent. The only sound was the rustling of paper as Miller turned the pages. He read the deed. He checked the names. He checked the dates. He looked at the signature on the affidavit. He flipped to the next page, and the next. As he read, his posture changed. The boredom vanished, replaced by the rigid alertness of an officer who realizes a crime is being committed in front of him. He handed the folder to Deputy Rodriguez, pointing to a specific paragraph. Rodriguez read it and looked up at Gavin. The look was not friendly. It was the look a predator gives to prey that has just limped into the open. Deputy Miller turned to the movers. The 3 men were huddled by the door, trying to look invisible. "Gentlemen," Miller said. His voice was louder now, commanding the space. "Who hired you for this job?" The foreman, a burly man with a clipboard, stepped forward immediately. He wanted no part of this. "He did," the foreman said, pointing a thick finger directly at Gavin. "Mr. Pike, he booked us last week." Miller nodded. "And who gave you access to the property? Who told you to start moving items inside?" The foreman pointed at Gavin again. "He did. He met us at the curb. He unlocked the door. He told us exactly where to put the furniture. He said to put the master bed in the big room because he wanted to set up before his wife got here." Miller turned his head slowly to look at Gavin. "Did he represent himself as the owner of this property?" Miller asked the mover. "Yes, sir," the foreman said. "He signed the work order as Gavin Pike. Homeowner. We have it in the truck if you need to see it. He told us he just bought the place." Gavin's face had lost all its color. He looked like a man who had just realized the parachute was not opening. He started to backpedal, his hands raising in a defensive posture. "Wait, hold on," Gavin stammered. "It is a figure of speech. I meant homeowner in the sense that it is family property. My wife is her sister. It is all the same pot. I did not mean literally on the paper. You guys are twisting my words. Deputy Miller took 2 steps toward Gavin. He did not look amused. Sir, you just identified yourself to me, a sworn peace officer, as the homeowner. Miller said. His voice was hard, cutting through Gavin's excuses. You attempted to use that false status to direct me to remove the actual legal owner from her own premises. No, Gavin choked. Do you have a deed? Miller barked. No, but... Do you have a lease? No, but we have a key, Tessa shouted, trying to jump in. My mother has a key. She gave it to us. That means we are allowed to be here. Miller turned to me. Ms. Caldwell, did you authorize a lease for these individuals? No, I said. Did you authorize them to reside here? Absolutely not. Did you give them a key? I gave a key to my mother for emergency maintenance only. I said, I did not authorize her to duplicate it, transfer it, or use it to move a family of 4 into my home. The document in Deputy Rodriguez's hand specifically revokes any implied license for them to be here. Rodriguez held up the paper. It is all here. Miller, trespass notice, effective immediately. Miller turned back to Gavin. The air in the room was suffocating. The arrogance that Gavin had worn 5 minutes ago was gone, replaced by the sweaty desperation of a liar caught in the light. Mr. Pike, Miller said, you have established residency nowhere. You have no lease. You have no deed. You have falsely identified yourself to law enforcement. At this moment, you are trespassing on private property. Tessa let out a wail. We have rights. We have children. You cannot just kick us out. We moved our whole life here. Ma'am, Deputy Rodriguez said, stepping in, you do not have rights to a house you do not own. This is not a civil dispute. The owner is standing right there, and she is telling you to leave. Marilyn rushed forward, grabbing Miller's arm. Officer, please, I am her mother. You have to listen to me. She is being vindictive. We can work this out. Just give us a few days. Just let them stay the night. Look at the children. Miller pulled his arm away from her grip. His face was stone. Ma'am, do not touch me, Miller warned. And no, I am not letting you stay the night. This is not a hotel. He turned to the movers. Gentlemen, stop bringing items in, Miller ordered. In fact, you need to reverse course. Anything you brought in needs to go back on that truck, right now. The movers did not hesitate. They turned around and started grabbing boxes. Gavin panicked. He lunged toward the foreman. No, stop. You work for me. I am paying you. Do not touch those boxes. Deputy Miller moved faster than a man of his size should be able to. He stepped between Gavin and the mover, his hand resting instinctively near his belt. Sir, take a step back, Miller ordered. But they are ruining my move, Gavin screamed, his voice cracking into a high-pitched whine. It is not your move. Sir, Miller said, and if you interfere with these men complying with a police order, I will place you in handcuffs for obstruction. Do you understand me? Gavin froze. He looked at the deputy. He looked at the movers hauling his precious CEO chair back out the door. He looked at me. I stood by the island, my face impassive. I did not smile. I did not gloat. I just watched. This was the reality check. This was the moment when the blurry lines of family obligation slammed into the solid wall of the penal code. Tessa was sobbing now, clutching Gavin's arm. Gavin, do something. Fix this. Gavin looked at her, and for the first time, I saw the realization hit him. He could not fix this. He could not talk his way out of this. He could not charm the badge. Officer, Gavin whispered, his voice shaking. We gave up our apartment. We have nowhere to go. That is a problem you should have solved before you broke into a house that does not belong to you, Miller said. He pointed to the door. You have 2 choices. Mr. Pike, you can supervise the removal of your property and leave voluntarily, or you can continue to argue, and I will arrest you for criminal trespass and filing a false report. Which one is it going to be? Gavin slumped. His shoulders collapsed. The big businessman, the visionary, the homeowner, he evaporated. All that was left was a squatter in a polo shirt. "We will leave," Gavin whispered. I looked at the clock on the wall. It was 12:30. It had taken exactly 30 minutes to dismantle their entire fantasy. But I was not done. As the movers began to haul the sofa back out the door, scraping against the frame in their haste, I stepped forward again. "Officer Miller," I said. "Yes, ma'am?" he asked, his tone respectful now. "I want to make sure the incident report reflects that Mr. Pike attempted to impersonate the property owner," I said. "I may need that for the insurance claim regarding the damage to my floors." Miller nodded, pulling out his notepad. "It will be in the report. Ms. Caldwell." I looked at Gavin. He heard me. He knew that this report would follow him. It would be a public record. The next time he tried to pitch an investor, a simple background check would show criminal trespass and false report. I had not just evicted him, I had branded him. And the neighbors were still watching. Through the window, I saw the retired judge across the street holding his phone up. He was filming. The downfall of Gavin Pike was being broadcast in high definition. The sound of heavy boots retreating across hardwood floors is a very different sound than when they are advancing. It is the sound of a siege being lifted. Deputy Miller stood in the center of the foyer like a traffic controller in a war zone. He pointed a gloved finger at the living room, then at the open front door. "Everything goes," Miller commanded. "If it came off that truck today, it goes back on the truck today. I want this residence cleared of all personal property belonging to Mr. Pike and Mrs. Pike within the hour." The movers, who had been hesitant only moments before, now moved with the frantic energy of men who just wanted to get paid and get away from a crime scene. They grabbed boxes without checking the labels. They hoisted the beige microfiber sofa, the one Gavin had declared was for the entertaining corner, and maneuvered it awkwardly back toward the exit. One of the cushions fell off and hit the floor with a dusty thud. Tessa watched the cushion fall, and that small, insignificant event seemed to shatter her composure completely. No. Wait, please," she cried, rushing forward and grabbing the arm of a mover who was carrying a stack of plastic bins. "You can't take the toys. My kids are exhausted. They have been in the car all morning. They need their things." She turned to Deputy Rodriguez, her face wet with tears that were starting to cut jagged lines through her foundation. "Officer, please have a heart. My son is 7. My daughter is 5. They are in the back room right now, confused and hungry. You cannot force us out onto the street when the children are this tired. It is inhumane. Just give us an hour. Just let them nap." It was the ultimate defense mechanism. Tessa was using the children as sandbags to stop the flood. She was not violent, but she was frantic, creating a scene of chaotic misery that was designed to make everyone else feel like a monster. Deputy Rodriguez looked uncomfortable, but he did not waver. "Ma'am, I understand the children are tired, but they cannot nap in a house you do not have the legal right to occupy. The sooner you get them into your vehicle, the sooner you can take them to a hotel or a relative's house." "We don't have a hotel," Tessa shrieked, her voice rising to a pitch that vibrated against the glass walls. "We canceled our lease. This is our home." "Not according to the deed," Rodriguez said calmly. "Brianna," Marilyn's voice cut through the noise like a whip. My mother charged across the room, dodging a mover carrying a lamp. She stopped 2 feet from me, her face contorted with a mixture of fury and humiliation. She pointed a shaking finger at the open door, where the neighbors across the street, the retired judge and his wife, were standing on their lawn, openly watching the spectacle. "Look at what you are doing," Marilyn screamed. "Do you see them? Do you see the neighbors? You are humiliating us. You are dragging the family name through the mud in front of the entire Sierra Crest community. How can you be so selfish? How can you stand there and watch your sister cry while strangers gawk at us?" I looked at my mother. I looked at the vein throbbing in her forehead. I looked at the performative outrage. For years, this tactic had worked. The threat of public embarrassment was the leash she used to keep me in line. She thought that if she made a scene, I would fold just to make it stop. But I was not embarrassed. I was vindicated. I am not the one who is humiliating this family. Mother, I said. My voice was low, but it was steady enough to cut under her shouting. The humiliation started when you took the key to my house, a key I entrusted to you, and handed it out like Halloween candy to people who had no right to it. Marilyn recoiled as if I had slapped her. I did it for the family. I did it to help. You did it to control me, I said. And now, everyone on this block knows exactly what kind of mother you are. You are not the victim here. You are the accomplice. You ungrateful, Marilyn started, but she was drowned out by Gavin. Gavin had been standing by the fireplace, watching his CEO office being dismantled. When he saw a mover pick up his box of investor files, mostly just empty binders and old magazines, he snapped, "Hey, put that down," Gavin roared. He lunged at the mover, grabbing the edge of the box. "That is confidential business material. You do not touch that. I told you to stop." The mover stumbled back, nearly dropping the box. "Buddy, let go. The cop said to move it." "I don't care what the cop said," Gavin shouted, his face turning a dangerous shade of purple. "I am paying your salary. I am the client. You listen to me." "Miss Pike." Deputy Miller's voice boomed across the room. He stepped forward, his hand dropping instinctively to the pair of handcuffs tucked into his belt. The sound of the leather creaking was audible in the sudden silence. "Step away from the mover," Miller ordered. "Right now." "He is taking my stuff," Gavin argued, but he let go of the box. "He is complying with a lawful order to vacate," Miller said. He walked until he was standing toe-to-toe with Gavin. "Now, I am going to explain this to you one time. If you interfere with these men again, if you touch them, or if you block their path, I will place you under arrest for obstruction of justice and disorderly conduct. You will leave this house in handcuffs. Do you understand?" Gavin looked at the handcuffs. He looked at the deputy's hard eyes. He looked at me. He wanted to fight. He wanted to be the alpha male he pretended to be on LinkedIn. But the reality of metal cuffs in a squad car was far more tangible than his ego. "I understand," Gavin muttered, looking at the floor. "Good," Miller said. "Stand over there by the wall and stay out of the way." But the nightmare for Gavin was not over. The foreman of the moving crew, a man named Henderson, had been watching the exchange with a scowl. He was holding a clipboard. He walked up to Deputy Miller, ignoring Gavin completely. "Officer," Henderson said, "I want to show you something, because if this guy isn't the owner, then I got a problem with my contract." "What is it?" Miller asked. Henderson flipped the clipboard around. "Look at the signature line, and look at the rate code." Miller leaned in. I stepped closer, curious. There, in black and white, was the moving contract. At the bottom, in Gavin's sprawling, arrogant signature, it read, "Gavin Pike, homeowner." And right next to it was a checked box, "New homeowner special, 20% discount." "He signed as the owner to get the promotional rate," Henderson explained, his voice loud enough for the whole room to hear. "We only give that discount if you show proof of closing or if you sign an affidavit that you are the primary title holder. It saves him about $400. The air in the room changed again. It shifted from a trespassing dispute to something much stickier. Deputy Miller looked at the paper. Then he looked at Gavin. This time, there was no patience in his expression. "So," Miller said, his voice dangerously soft, "not only did you lie to me, Mr. Pike, you signed a legal contract under false pretenses to obtain a financial benefit. In the state of Colorado, that is theft of services, and since you signed a document claiming ownership to defraud a business, we are bordering on forgery." Gavin's knees actually buckled. He had to grab the back of a dining chair to stay upright. It was just a coupon," Gavin stammered. "Everybody does it. It is just a discount." "It is fraud," Miller corrected him, "and now it is part of my report." Miller turned to Henderson. "Do you want to press charges for the theft of services?" Henderson looked at Gavin with disgust. "If he pays the full rate plus the inconvenience fee right now, I will let it slide. If his card declines, I am filing charges." "You heard the man," Miller said to Gavin. "Better hope your credit is good." I watched Gavin fumble for his wallet, his hands shaking so badly he dropped his credit card on the floor. He had to bend down to pick it up, scrambling on the hardwood like a servant. It was pathetic. It was total devastation. Outside, the audience was growing. I saw the neighbor, Mrs. Gable, standing by her rose bushes with her phone raised. She was recording the movers hauling the CEO chair out to the truck. She was recording the police car. She was recording the shouting. By tomorrow morning, the entire homeowners association would know that Gavin Pike was not a successful tech entrepreneur. They would know he was a fraud who tried to squat in his sister-in-law's house and got caught trying to scam the moving company. His reputation in Sierra Crest was dead before he had even unpacked a single box. Tessa saw it too. She was standing by the window, holding her daughter who had wandered out of the bedroom, rubbing her eyes. Tessa looked at the neighbors. She looked at Gavin, who was being lectured by the mover about the credit card transaction. She looked at Marilyn, who was sulking in the corner, defeated. Then, slowly, she turned her head and looked at me. For the first time in her life, Tessa did not look at me with pity or entitlement. She did not look at me like I was the piggy bank. She looked at me with fear. She realized, in that moment, that the emotional leverage was gone. She could not cry her way out of this. She could not use the kids to guilt me. I had just watched her husband nearly get arrested and I had not blinked. She realized that I was willing to let them burn. "Brianna," Tessa whispered. It wasn't a plea. It was just an acknowledgement of the new reality. "The truck is loading, Tessa," I said, my voice devoid of any warmth. "You should probably go get the car seats. It is a long drive back to wherever you are going." Tessa did not argue. She did not fight. She simply nodded, a jerky, mechanical motion, and turned to gather her children. The queen of the family had been dethroned, and all that was left was a woman standing in a stranger's living room, waiting for permission to leave. The sound of the moving truck's engine idling in the driveway was a low, grumbling bass note that vibrated against the glass walls of my living room. It was the sound of retreat. The movers were working in reverse now, hauling the scuffed furniture back out with twice the speed and none of the care they had shown coming in. I watched a dining chair with a wobbly leg disappear through the doorway, carried by a man who looked like he wanted to be anywhere else on earth. My phone vibrated in my hand. I did not need to look at the screen to know who it was. The timing was too perfect. The chain of command in the Caldwell family had been activated. Marilyn had realized she was losing the battle on the ground, so she had called in air support. I looked down. Dad. My father, Frank Caldwell, is a man who believes that peace is simply the absence of noise. He never cared who was right or who was hurting. As long as nobody was yelling, for 30 years, he had let Marilyn steer the ship while he sat in the back and pretended not to notice when she threw me overboard. I slid my thumb across the screen and answered. "Hello, Dad," I said. "Brianna," his voice boomed through the speaker, breathless and angry. "Your mother just called me in tears. She says there are police cars in the driveway. She says you are arresting Gavin. Have you lost your mind? You call off those officers right now." I walked away from the group, moving toward the far wall of the living room. I needed a clean background for what I was about to do. "I am not calling anyone off, Dad," I said calmly. "You are tearing this family apart," Frank shouted. "Over a house? It is just a building, Brianna. You do not humiliate your sister like this. You do not treat family like criminals. You apologize to Gavin. You let them stay the night. And we will talk about this like civilized people on Sunday." "Civilized people do not break into homes they do not own," I said. "They did not break in," Frank argued. "Your mother gave them a key. That is implied permission. You are twisting everything to be the victim. You have always been difficult, but this is cruel. You are being malicious." Malicious, that was the word. It hung in the air, heavy and unfair. I did not scream back. I did not try to explain my side of the story. I knew that in the court of Frank Caldwell, I was guilty until proven innocent, and even then, I was still guilty for making a fuss. "Dad," I said, "I am going to send you something. I want you to watch it before you say another word." "I do not want to watch anything. I want you to—" "Watch it," I commanded. I pulled the phone away from my ear. I opened the message thread with my father. I selected the video file I had recorded 30 minutes ago, the one where Gavin was standing on my porch, chest puffed out, telling the movers he was the owner, the one where Tessa admitted, on camera, that Mom gave her the key to set up the house, the one where the police officer read my name off the deed and told Gavin he was committing fraud. I hit send. "It is sent," I said, putting the phone back to my ear. "Open it." There was a silence on the line. I could hear him fumbling with his glasses on the other end. Then, the tinny sound of the video playing back through his phone speakers echoed in his kitchen. I heard Gavin's voice, arrogant and loud. I heard Tessa's admission. I heard the deputy's stern warning about jail time. I waited. I let the evidence speak for me. "That," my father stammered after a long minute. "That is, Gavin said he was the owner?" "Yes," I said. "And the police, they threatened to arrest him for fraud?" "Theft of services and criminal trespass," I clarified, "because he signed a contract claiming the house was his." My father went quiet. The narrative Marilyn had spun for him, the one about the cruel, hysterical Brianna attacking her innocent sister, was dissolving. He was looking at the raw footage of his son-in-law trying to steal my property. "If you want to protect someone, Dad," I said, my voice low and final, "you should protect the truth. Because if you come over here and try to defend this, you are going to be defending a crime, and I will not hesitate to put you on the record too." "Brianna," he whispered, his voice deflated. "I didn't know." "You never know," I said, "because you never ask." I hung up. I turned back to the room just as my phone buzzed again. This time, the name on the screen brought a wave of cool relief. Elliot Graves. I answered immediately. "Ms. Caldwell," Elliot's voice was crisp, professional, and sharp as a knife. "I received your text. I have the petition for the emergency restraining order drafted. Given the police involvement and the attempt to establish residency through fraud, we have grounds to request a no-contact order for Gavin Pike and Tessa Pike regarding the property. Do you want me to file it?" "File it," I said. "And Elliot, I need clarity on the key situation." "Go on," Elliot said. "They are claiming that possession of the key implies tenancy," I said, watching my mother whisper furiously to Tessa in the corner. "I need you to hear this next part." I lowered the phone but kept the line open. I walked toward the center of the room, where Gavin was sullenly watching the last of his boxes being carried out. Marilyn saw me coming and straightened up, preparing for another round of guilt. "Brianna," Marilyn started, her voice trembling with suppressed rage, "your father is going to hear about this." "He already has," I said. "He has the video." Marilyn's face went slack. She knew exactly what that meant. She had lost her enforcer. "I have a question," I said, addressing the group but looking directly at Tessa. "You said Mom gave you the key, the one with the unicorn keychain." "Yes," Tessa snapped, pulling the key out of her pocket and holding it up like a holy relic. "This key, it opens the door. That means we were allowed in. You can't call it breaking and entering if we used a key." I smiled. It was not a nice smile. It was the smile of a trap snapping shut. "Tessa," I said softly, "which door did you open with that key?" Tessa blinked, confused by the specificity of the question. "The garage side door. The one by the keypad. We came in through the garage so we could unload the truck on the flat driveway. Why does it matter?" "It matters," I said, "because I changed the locks on the front door and the back patio doors last night." The room went dead silent. "What?" Gavin whispered. "I had a locksmith out here at 8 o'clock last night," I said. "I changed the master cylinders on every primary entry point. The only lock I didn't change was the secondary service door in the garage, because the locksmith didn't have the right part for that specific handle." I took a step closer to Marilyn. Her face was draining of color. "You tried the front door first, didn't you?" I asked. Marilyn looked away. "You tried the front door," I continued. "And the key didn't work. A normal person, a person with implied permission to water plants, would have called me. They would have said, 'Hey, the key doesn't work.' But you didn't call me. You didn't call because you knew you weren't supposed to be moving furniture in. So you went around the side, you tried the service door, and when it opened, you snuck in." I pointed to the small, dark sensor mounted in the corner of the hallway ceiling, leading from the garage. "And since I knew that was the only weak point," I said, "I had the security company install a motion-activated camera right there yesterday afternoon. I have high-definition footage of you trying the front door, failing, and then sneaking around the back to break in through the garage. That is not tenancy. Tessa, that is forced entry." Marilyn put a hand to her chest. She looked like she was going to be sick. She realized now that I hadn't just reacted to their arrival. I had anticipated it. I had engineered the battlefield so that every step they took dug them deeper into a legal grave. "You set us up," Gavin hissed. "You knew we were coming." "I knew you were thieves," I corrected him. "I just gave you the opportunity to prove it." I held out my hand. "Palm open. Excellent." "Give me the keys," I said. "All of them. Now." Tessa looked at the unicorn keychain in her hand. She looked at the police officer, who was watching the exchange with deep interest. She realized that holding on to that key was no longer a symbol of power. It was evidence of a crime. She slammed the key into my hand. The metal bit into my palm. "I hate you," Tessa whispered. "I hope you rot in this big, empty house." "And the copy," I said, turning to Marilyn. "I know you made a copy for yourself. Hand it over." Marilyn stared at me. Her eyes were wet, but not with sadness, with shock. She was looking at a daughter she no longer recognized, a daughter who had stripped away the power of maternal guilt and replaced it with the cold, hard steel of boundaries. Slowly, she reached into her purse. She pulled out a shiny new brass key. She dropped it into my hand. She didn't say a word. She couldn't. "Deputy Miller," I said, turning to the officer, "please note that all unauthorized keys have been recovered. If anyone enters this property after today, it will be without any form of access device." "Noted," Miller said. The movers were done. The last box was on the truck. The foreman walked in, got Gavin to sign the credit card receipt, charging him the full, non-discounted rate of $2,400, and handed him the carbon copy. "We are leaving," the foreman said. "Do not call us again." Gavin crumpled the receipt in his hand. He looked at the empty living room. The scuff marks on the floor where they had dragged the sofa were the only proof they had ever been here. "Let's go," Gavin muttered to Tessa. They gathered the children, my nephew, Leo, looked at me with big, confused eyes. "Aunt Bree?" he asked. "Are we not staying?" My heart cracked. Just a hairline fracture. This was the collateral damage. This was the part I hated. I crouched down so I was eye level with him. I did not lie. "No, Leo," I said gently. "You are not staying. This is my house. Your mommy and daddy made a mistake, and now they have to fix it." "You are a monster," Tessa spat, grabbing Leo's hand and yanking him toward the door. "Don't talk to him. You lost the right to be his aunt." She turned at the doorway, framed by the bright sunlight that seemed too cheerful for the wreckage in the room. She decided to fire one last shot, the heaviest artillery she had left. "Do you not love them?" she demanded, gesturing to the kids. "How can you claim to be family and do this? Do you not have a heart? Look at them. Brianna, you are throwing them out." I stood up. I felt tall. I felt solid. "I do not accept that premise," I said. "I am not throwing them out. I am stopping you from breaking in. There is a difference." I looked her dead in the eye. "I did not harm anyone. Tessa, I just refused to let you rob me. If that makes me a monster in your story, then fine. I will be the monster, but I will be a monster with a house that belongs to me." She opened her mouth to scream, to curse, to throw one last jagged rock of guilt. But she saw the look on my face. She saw that the target she had been shooting at for 30 years was gone. She turned and walked out. Gavin followed her, head down, avoiding the gaze of the neighbors. Marilyn lingered for 1 second longer. She looked at the house, then at me. She shook her head, a gesture of profound disappointment. "You will be lonely," she predicted. "You will be all alone here." "I count on it," I said. She left. I stood in the doorway and watched them go. I watched them load the kids into their SUV. I watched Gavin get into the passenger seat because his hands were shaking too hard to drive. I watched the moving truck rumble to life, spewing a cloud of dark exhaust into the pristine mountain air. I watched them drive down the winding road of Sierra Crest, past the aspen trees, past the security gate, and out of my life. I waited until the sound of their engines had faded completely into the hum of the wind in the trees. The neighbors across the street were still watching. I lifted my hand and gave them a small, polite wave. The judge hesitated, then waved back. He understood. He had seen the law enforced. I stepped back inside. I closed the massive mahogany door. I turned the deadbolt. Click. I leaned my back against the wood and slid down until I was sitting on the floor of the foyer. I waited for the tears. I waited for the crushing guilt that usually followed a confrontation with my mother. I waited for the panic that I had gone too far. But nothing came. Instead, I took a deep breath, my lungs filled with cool, clean air, my chest, which had felt tight for 6 years, tight with secrets, tight with financial stress, tight with the burden of carrying 3 other adults on my back, suddenly felt expansive. I was not happy. Happiness was too light a word for this. I felt relieved. I felt unburdened. It was the feeling of taking off a backpack filled with stones after a 10-mile hike. I looked around the empty living room. There was a scratch on the floor where the sofa had been. There was a muddy footprint by the island. There was a faint smell of Gavin's cheap cologne lingering in the air. But the house was silent, and for the first time in my life, the silence did not feel empty. It felt like ownership. I stood up. I walked to the kitchen island. I picked up the spray bottle of cleaner I had brought with me. I sprayed the muddy footprint. I wiped it away. It was time to clean my house. The sun had set over Sierra Crest, painting the valley in deep shades of indigo and violet. The moving truck was gone. The police cruiser was gone. The driveway was empty, save for my beat-up sedan, which looked comically small, parked in front of the massive glass structure. I did not sleep that night. Instead, I worked. At 8 in the evening, a specialized security team arrived. I had booked them weeks ago, but I paid them triple the rate to come out for an emergency after-hours installation. By midnight, the house was no longer just a building. It was a fortress. We installed biometric fingerprint scanners on the main doors. We set up cameras with facial recognition software at the perimeter. Before the technicians left, I walked down to the end of the driveway with a flashlight and a hammer. I planted a metal sign into the earth, right next to the mailbox. It was not a polite, no soliciting sign. It was a stark, white rectangle with red lettering that cited the Colorado Penal Code regarding criminal trespass. It stated, in no uncertain terms, that this property was under 24-hour video surveillance and that all unauthorized persons would be prosecuted to the fullest extent of the law. I stood back and looked at it. It was not decorative. It was a boundary line drawn in steel. The next morning, the sun rose on a new world. At 9 o'clock, while I was drinking black coffee in my empty kitchen, Elliot Graves was launching the second wave of the attack. He sent a process server to the motel on the outskirts of Briarwood, where Gavin and Tessa had been forced to spend the night. The server handed them a thick envelope. Inside was a cease and desist order, along with a petition for a permanent restraining order. It barred Gavin Pike, Tessa Pike, and Marilyn Caldwell from coming within 500 feet of my property. It also barred them from contacting me via phone, email, or third-party messengers for the purpose of harassment. The fallout was immediate. By 10 o'clock, my phone began to light up. It was not my parents. It was my Aunt Sarah. Then my cousin Mike. Then my Uncle Bob. My father and mother had clearly woken up and started the spin machine. They were calling every relative in the tri-state area, weeping about how Brianna had snapped and thrown a mother and 2 babies out into the cold night. I did not answer a single call. Instead, I opened my laptop. I had prepared a document the night before. It was a PDF titled Statement of Facts Regarding 42 Sierra Crest Drive. It was clinical. It was cold. It contained the deed. It contained the screenshots of Gavin's texts demanding I pay for catering. It contained the video of the police interaction. It contained the invoice from the moving company showing the fraud. I composed a single email. I put every aunt, uncle, cousin, and family friend on the blind carbon copy line. The body of the email was short. Dear family, you are likely hearing a very emotional version of events regarding my home purchase. Before you form an opinion or ask me to apologize, please review the attached evidence. I will not be discussing this further. Any harassment on behalf of Gavin or Tessa will result in legal blocking. I hit send. The phone calls stopped within 10 minutes. The silence that followed was heavy, but it was the silence of people realizing they had been lied to. They watched the video. They saw Gavin claiming he owned the house. They saw the entitlement. They saw the truth. My mother lost her army before she could even mobilize it. But the universe was not done with Gavin Pike. At noon, I received a text from Mrs. Gable, the neighbor across the street. We had exchanged numbers after the police left. You might want to know, she wrote, that my husband, the judge, plays golf with the managing partner of the venture capital firm your brother-in-law was trying to impress. I smiled. Apparently, Gavin had tried to salvage his investor meeting. He had texted the group, claiming there was a plumbing emergency at the new estate, and tried to move the meeting to a coffee shop downtown. He was still trying to sell the lie. But the judge had already forwarded the video of Gavin arguing with the police to his golf buddy. The investors did not just cancel the meeting. They sent a brief email to Gavin stating that due to discrepancies in his personal disclosures and potential legal liabilities, they were withdrawing their interest in Nexus AI Consulting. Gavin lost his funding before he even ordered his latte. The ripple effect continued. Tessa, who had posted a photo of our new view on Instagram the day before, a photo taken from my deck without my permission, was now facing the humiliation of a retraction. She deleted the post, but the internet is forever. Friends were commenting, asking when the housewarming was. She had to ignore them, or worse, lie. But the rumors in Sierra Crest travel faster than light. By dinner time, everyone knew that the rich couple who moved in were actually squatters who got kicked out by the real owner. Tessa lost her social standing. The perfect life she curated online was exposed as a fraud. And Marilyn? My mother faced the most subtle, yet stinging consequence of all. In our tight-knit community, property rights are sacred. The story that she had taken a spare key, given in trust, and used it to move a family in behind her daughter's back spread through her garden club and church group. She went to the grocery store that afternoon. Mrs. Gable was there. Mrs. Gable did not wave. She simply turned her cart down the other aisle. It was a small gesture, but in Briarwood, it was a death sentence. Marilyn was no longer the sacrificing mother. She was the woman who betrayed her own daughter for status. I sat in my living room as the sun began to go down again. The house was quiet. The air was still. I had one last piece of business to handle. I called Elliot Graves. "It is done," Elliot said. "The email blast worked. Your family is terrified of you right now." "Good," I said. "Now let's lock it down. I want to put the house into a trust." "Smart," Elliot said. "I want the trust documents to explicitly state that, in the event of my death or incapacitation, the property is to be liquidated and the proceeds donated to the Colorado Land Preservation Fund. I want a clause that specifically disinherits any family member within the second degree of consanguinity." "You are cutting them out of the will," Elliot said. "I am ensuring that they never have a reason to hope for my demise," I said. "I want them to know that this house will never, under any circumstances, belong to them. Not now. Not when I die. Never. I will have the papers ready by Monday, Elliot said. I hung up. I stood up and walked to the single box sitting in the center of the living room. It was the only box I had brought with me in my car. It contained the things that actually mattered to me. My favorite books, a cashmere blanket, a coffee mug I bought in Paris during the one trip I took before the austerity years began. I opened the box. I took out the mug. I placed it on the kitchen island. It looked small on the vast expanse of white quartz, but it was mine. I walked to the wall of windows. The lights of Briarwood were twinkling in the valley below, a sea of gold and amber. The reflection of the room behind me was ghosted in the glass. I saw the empty space where Gavin tried to put his chair. I saw the empty wall where Tessa tried to hang her pictures. I took a deep breath. I filled my lungs until they pressed against my ribs. For 34 years, I had lived with a regulator on my chest. I had breathed shallowly, careful not to take up too much air, careful not to make too much noise, careful not to offend the delicate ecosystem of my family's dysfunction. I exhaled. It was a long, shuddering sound. I am here, I whispered to the empty room. I was not lonely. I was not sad. I was alone, yes, but for the first time, I understood the difference between being alone and being free. Family, I realized, was not a suicide pact. It was not a mandate to set yourself on fire to keep others warm. And most importantly, family was not a master key that unlocked every door in your life just because you shared a last name. I turned off the overhead lights. The only illumination came from the city below and the soft blue glow of the security panel by the door. I was safe, I was solvent, and I was the owner. I picked up my mug. I walked to the bedroom, the master bedroom, which was mine, and would always be mine, and I closed the door. This was not just a move. This was a resurrection. Thank you so much for listening to my story. I know it was intense, but I hope it gives you the courage to set your own boundaries, no matter how hard it feels. I would love to know where you are listening from today. Are you tuning in from New York, London, or maybe somewhere in Asia? Please drop a comment below and let me know your thoughts on how I handled Gavin and Tessa. And if you enjoyed this story, please make sure to subscribe to the channel Lila Revenge Stories. Hit that like button and smash the hype button to help this story reach more people who might need to hear it. Stay strong, and remember, you hold the keys to your own life.